Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah. I am here with Midwest Writing Center Executive Director Ryan Collins and my cat Carter to talk about workshopping today. We're going to get into, it'll be a little bit conversation, a little bit me asking Ryan questions. Then at the end, we'll talk about what's up at the Midwest Writing Center and do a prompt. Thanks for coming back, Ryan. How you doing today?
I'm alive and well and living in hope and happy to be here with you and your cats.
I forgot to lock him out, but so far he's been good.
True. That's, I mean, that's cool. Don't lock them out. Let them. They should learn about questions about workshopping too.
Yeah, so a question I see a lot is how do you know who to trust in workshop? And the first person I thought of for who would know how to discern was you.
Oh, that's nice.
So let's just get to it.
Sure.
How do you know who to trust?
How to trust? I don't know if trust is like maybe the right way to start thinking. Trust is big. Trust is big. Hopefully, if you're in any kind of workshop or critique group or something like that, you're already there with people that you have a good feeling about and who you're already somewhat familiar with. I know if you're in sort of like a classroom, everybody kind of signs up and registers. There's no way to know that necessarily, but if you are putting together a critique group or trying to put together something like that. But even if you don't know them, I think it's usually pretty safe to assume that people come to such things for the same reasons that you do, right? To get feedback on their craft, to be with other people who are trying to do the work and thinking about it in that way. So hopefully there's at least a little bit of like buy-in and initial trust. I think
trust was the wrong word.
Absolutely. Well, not necessarily the wrong word. I mean, it takes time to build that, right? So like, at the start, I bring in Poem to workshop, and I'm in a room with mostly or all strangers. I would hopefully there's an opportunity to frame the work a little bit, particularly if they're not familiar with what I'm trying to do. I guess, I mean, I think whoever's running the workshop needs to kind of set up some intentions and some things like that, because I think that's where a lot of this stuff starts. And I think sometimes the traditional workshop method, in terms of I come in, I bring Poem, I read Poem, and then I shut up, and then everybody else talks about Poem around me or near me, but not necessarily to me or with me. And then at the end, I maybe have an opportunity to chime in and speak my piece. I don't know that's always the most constructive way to go about things, particularly when you don't know each other, or you don't maybe already have that rapport or that trust already built up. Because not everybody is trying to get the same kind of feedback. Not everybody's got the same kind of workshop experience. So I think it's incumbent upon whoever is in charge of such things. Being in charge of a workshop is such a dubious thing.
That's probably a better place to start. There are a lot of different ways to workshop. I'm only really familiar with 3, but I know there are more than that. So if we're starting in, let's say I am running my first workshop, what do you think would be a good intro workshop method for a new group?
For a group of people who don't all know each other already, I think the first thing is just rectifying that, making sure that everybody is I know the introductions and icebreaker things are sometimes not the reason for the season, but I do think it's important to sort of not explain your poems to other people, because that's not or your work, your writing, not just poems, but to give people a sense of where you're at, what you're trying to accomplish, what you're hoping to get out of the experience. I think that's important. And I know that I've been in a lot of good workshops where that wasn't necessarily on the docket. You know what I mean? And I think as time has gone on, there's a little bit more primacy and value assigned to such things. I think the traditional workshop method sort of values you just come in and we read the work sort of cold, or we've spent whatever time with it if we've had a chance to spend time with it. And it's, very much about line edits and the content sort of stuff and formal considerations, and all of that is great, but um, that's not necessarily what everybody wants. So like if already going in that someone's more kind of concerned about the rhetorical aspects of their work, or is the language working, word choices and things like that. Some people are really confident in their syntax or their character development, but they need work on plot or whatever it might be. So I think it's like worth the time to give each other a sense of that and then kind of work from there.
Going into it saying, here's what I want from your critique.
Yeah, or here's what I hope to get. I mean, I don't want to like, it's hard. It's such a like
framing is important.
Yeah. I think it's such, everyone's coming at it with different experiences, and it's such a subjective thing, like top to bottom, that I think at least indicating what you're hoping for, and then maybe people can sort of guide their questions and comments toward that, as opposed to what they might default to. I mean, just going off my own experiences when I was getting my MFA, that a lot of it seemed to be like really deep reading, and like a lot of attention to the all aspects of the work, but there was a lot of like line editing going on, and like kind of carving up people's poems in that traditional, often somewhat scary way, with like pen marks everywhere and things crossed out and words suggested, and rewritten lines. And I think that's how a lot of people learn. I think it's like good, but it ends up being how I think most people do that, and they end up giving critiques or revisions of poems that would be how they would revise their work, poems or stories or whatever.
But they are not the writer.
But yeah. So like they're taking somebody else's work and editing it as though it was theirs, which usually is not maybe the most helpful thing, I think, in a workshop. So trying to get a handle on what they're trying to accomplish with the work, or what they're hoping the work accomplishes, can stave some of that off, I think. And I think that just helps most of the feedback that you're going to get be a little bit more focused, and kind of stay away from that kind of stuff, or at least, you tell people what to avoid. I think that's a good place to start. It might take some time, especially if you're only like, having one meeting like every month or something like that. Like if you have a limited amount of time, it can be hard to do that. But I think it is, if you're going to continue to meet with that group, worth it.
Totally. And also, for folks who haven't done a lot of workshopping, well, I think that the advice you just gave is fantastic, right? You probably want to go in and say, here's what I'm hoping to receive as far as feedback goes, but you also cannot, and I lay this as a rule just about every time, you cannot explain your work in advance, because that spoils the critique. You don't know, if I can't say if it's effective if I already have the right thing in mind.
Right. Yeah, I think, and it's a fine line. I think like people tend to want to do that. Like, this is what I mean. Please understand what I mean, even if you don't get it from the work. And I get that in a traditional sort of workshop method, that's what that's trying to eliminate to the greatest extent possible. But also, I think not letting people have much, if any, opportunity to talk about their work, I don't know that that's the healthiest thing either. Particularly if you're in a workshop with a lot of people who don't look like you, and whose lives are not like yours, and you're not coming to the work from the same place. Regardless, I'm trying to write the best work that I can, I'm trying to publish and do whatever, like that stuff. But like what comes before it, and who people are as individuals, and like I don't know that method of it, I think particularly for like just starting out, it's good to learn that traditional method. But I think like when I work with younger writers, particularly, I try to get to a place where writers feel like they have some space to answer questions, and there can be more of a dialogue about the work without just spilling the beans and being like, this is what my story is about, or this is what my poem means. I think that's good practice for people getting critiques. I think it's good practice for people who are giving the critiques too.
So I first learned that workshop method, right, where you read your work, and then people give you feedback, and then then you probably say, okay, here's what I would really like from feedback. And then at the end, if folks have questions for the writer, that happens. And then following that, I moved into art school where we did, rather than giving direct feedback, people would repeat your piece to you in their own words. And I definitely thought that that was awful at the time. And looking back, it taught me so well how to receive feedback, because now I can say, like, um even in a more traditional workshop, um I can say, oh, they misunderstood this thing, therefore that wasn't clear, right? Or if they say, I really like how you did X, but I had no intention of doing X, I can consider, um either working with X, working that into my piece. I've got a new element to consider here, or I didn't mean that, and I think that concept actually ruins what I was going for, so I can, work that out differently. I in retrospect, right? I'm a long time removed from that particular method, but it taught me how to receive criticism in a much more healthy way, I think, because I can interrogate the criticism that I'm receiving, even if I would prefer someone really get to the nitty gritty sometimes and be like, this this thing
Oh yeah.
didn't work for me, and just explicitly say it.
Yeah, and that's definitely where I come from, is like, I'm not getting this, or this isn't coming across, and kind of very and like, yeah, I mean, like most of where, for my MFA, I too went to an art school, which was good because there, I think there was a little bit more flexibility, and depending on the room and depending on the class and the instructor and the group of people that were there, we got to know each other, and like, so there would be kind of some flex with this, it wouldn't be sort of super orthodox or anything like that. Um, but yeah, I think yeah, hearing it in other voices is great. I think like if you have the time to do, it's like I write poems mostly. Most of the workshops I've been in have been sort of poem, and so poems usually being a little bit shorter. Yeah, that's usually the thing. Like we would come in, and this was pretty much in any class. I would, everyone had the work in advance, so they were all prepared theoretically. And then you would read your work, and then someone else would read your work, and that was so valuable, I think, because you just, even before just hearing how other people read it, for me, like, is really really useful, right? So even before we get to critique, I think that's like a really valuable thing if you have time. I think even if you're doing prose, if you can do like an excerpt or a couple paragraphs or something like that, hear your work in other people's voice will
Oh, absolutely.
teach you about your, I mean, reading your work out loud's a great necessary editing tool, but hearing other people do it, I think, is really something entirely different to access, and can be really like instructive. But I think, yeah, being able to like introduce a little bit, and like I try to start with concerns, like, what's the thing about this piece that you don't feel like is there yet? Don't tell us what it's about, but what is the thing that's like sticking in your craw about this work? Like, is it the language? Is it a character? Is it construction? Is it format? Is it shape? Like, whatever it is, like,
What I, the writer, am struggling with.
yes, like, and like other people might see it differently, but that's sort of the nature of workshop in my experience, is that everybody's going to see everything. A lot of people are going to see a lot of things differently, and there's going to be often conflicting feedback, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That just means, people are engaging with the work in a different way, and it shows you that, your work, or all work, I think, communicates with people, not always exactly in the way that we intend, but still communicates, and there's value to be had there. Because you might be, my favorite moments in workshop are where somebody's getting a totally different reading than what I was intending, because then it forces me to look at the whole work in a different way.
I love that you said it's your favorite, because I think that I agree with that it's a favorite, but like in the moment it sucks. And you're like, no, 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 you don't get it. And then you're like, oh, no, 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 that means I didn't convey it.
Yeah, I try not to, I mean, I don't, I guess, with the poetry thing, it's not so much, I don't worry as much about people getting it. I'm more concerned about what people are getting rather than like trying to make some rhetorical point. Like if I want to make a point, I'll write an essay with a thesis or something. Seriously. So just, and that's just me. That's just like the poems that I write. I'm not necessarily invested in like trying to hit a bullseye because I think frankly, poems like that are often kind of boring. And I don't want to write boring poems above all else. So yikes. So I think that's fun, but I get if you're someone who like I have a very clear intention and I want it to be born across in this one specific way, that could be really frustrating. But also, I would suggest to you that if you don't hold too tightly onto that thing, because when you have the privilege of other people reading your work and giving you some feedback on it, they can open up windows and shine light on your work in ways that are like not necessarily available or obvious to you, even if they seem obvious in hindsight. And I think if you're not willing to be open to that, you're missing a big point of what workshop can be, the value of work that workshop can have for your work. Do you know what I mean? Like, because then otherwise it's just like a guessing game. Like, can you guess my intention? And it's like, then you're sort of grading the feedback you get on how correctly or incorrectly people are discerning your work. And that to me sounds a lot more like what I did in high school English class, which I don't want to do anymore. You know, that's not why I read at all. I'm perfectly fine having my own relationship to a text and understanding of it.
Well, not only that, but me judging your feedback based on what I want to hear is not, I mean, no one is gaining anything from that. I wanted to rewind just to put a little more emphasis on it. The power of someone else reading your work to you is, I mean, it's not something that I can demonstrate now, right? I don't have anyone else's work in front of me, but as long as you're really there and listening to the person read, you can definitely get a feel for what's working and what appears to be impactful to the audience. And it's really not something you can illustrate without doing. But it is really, really powerful and sometimes painful. Like I don't necessarily want to interact with my work that way because a lot of the time the work is really personal and it's awkward. It's like seeing yourself naked through someone else's eyes. Like it's uncomfortable
That's pretty great. I love
to have
that.
someone read something so personal to you, like from you to you. But it can be incredibly, incredibly helpful for figuring out how to finish off the final drafts.
Yeah, and I think like what you're talking, I love that analogy, and I think like what you're talking about goes back to like something I've heard, I don't know, countless writers and artists say in different ways that I'll like poorly paraphrase now, but that like the vulnerability of the work is power, right? The thing that you're scared to write into and the thing that you're scared to bring to workshop is maybe the thing that's going to be the most powerful thing that you're going to put forward, right? But yeah, hearing that back to you in that way, in that context, has got to be. I haven't really workshopped a lot of stuff like that, so I haven't really had that experience where I've been ugh. But it's hard. I mean, I don't think it's like it sounds like an easy thing, like a lot of things in writing it sounds relatively easy, but yeah, it's hard to listen to somebody else read your work, especially if they are reading it a totally different, like for my poems, I'm really invested in sound and music, so like hearing how somebody else reads them versus how I hear them in my head, it's like different interpretations of a song.
With
You know what
anything
I
that
mean?
has
And
any kind
that's
of
really
rhythmic
cool.
sound to it, which I would say all writing does, but I think definitely folks would argue with me about that. I also had, I think that, that was a beautiful point. I had a professor once dedicate an entire class to a whole, one day, not the entire class, to reminding us and making it really clear to us and pounding it into our head that your writing is not your identity, which as artists is really freaking hard to hear because I put my whole heart into this. So when someone gives you criticism, it's not about you. And that's really hard to internalize.
I think, yeah, I think especially starting out, I think like, just in the years I've been at the writing center, like, I always, send me some work or come to writer studio or whatever it is, or like, share something or like come to an open mic and read some work. And like, there's just the general fear of rejection that you're going to present something that you made of you in some way and that people aren't going to like it or make fun of it or whatever the worry is. Like, I mean, that's real and that's scary. And I think I don't think that's any different in workshop, even though you're in a room of people that are theoretically there to do the same thing and kind of put the same foot forward. But I think all that stuff is like that's kind of what I mean about the vulnerability thing. The more of that you're willing to the more risk you're willing to take in terms of that, and the more uncomfortable you're willing to be about putting, if you're doing it, because you want to and you care about the work, even if it makes you uncomfortable, put it out there. And starting out, I think like, just feeling super vulnerable about it or whatever. Yeah, that can be kind of a deterrent. I think like that's one of the things that comes with time in a workshop is like people not taking it too personally, because it is personal, right? Like people don't take it personal. Like I think everybody to some degree or another takes it a little bit personal.
To not take it
yeah,
personal.
Exactly. Especially if you're writing about, if you're writing memoir, if you're writing personal essay, if you're writing about, that kind of stuff, really direct life experience. How is it not like, it's worth trying to do that work. I think like, even if it's your first time, that would be one of the things, I always say in my comp classes, and I always say it in pretty much any workshop, like can't remember where I first heard it, but it's one of those great sort of like easy to remember kind of rhymey thing. Make comments in the spirit of helpfulness, take comments in the spirit of helpfulness. I think like that's like one of those easy little, like whatever the format, whoever the group is, whatever, like that's something that you can do both giving and receiving that I think is like worth remembering and worth taking with. Because in my, like, I think there's a lot of like, when we do see writing workshops in popular culture, like in movies or stuff like that, it's always like super harsh, or just like artistic critique culture in general, right? Like whether it's visual art or music, it's always like, if you're going to be, the most badass writer or musician or artist or whatever, it's like all this like super brutal feedback and everybody's like, it's like, how shitty can you be to other people equals how talented, there's like some like relationship to that. And I've never really found that to be true. I've been in a lot of different workshops with a lot of people, and like,
it's almost the opposite.
Yeah, that's not well received in my experience by anybody, because it's not, you want to be spoken directly to, right? You want people to take it seriously, and you want people to tell you if like things aren't landing, things aren't working. And you do no one any service and workshop by saying, this is great. I think all of this is great. Like that helps no one, even if it's true. Like it's too general and just kind of gives you nothing. But like, just if you can try to maintain that sense of like, I'm here to get some help, and my way of paying that back is to give some help and to be sincere and genuine and just try to do my best with it. Like, I think you get a lot of both sides of the process.
Totally. I would also say, oh shoot, you had something I wanted to respond to and I didn't write it down.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, those folks who are particularly harsh, maybe in the spirit of helpfulness, maybe in mistaken or misrepresented ego is going on.
Yeah, some people's helpfulness is harsher than others, I guess. That's fair.
You don't want to see that person again, and you don't want their advice. So like, also just don't be that guy. And beyond that, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right?
I think for a writing workshop, that's definitely true. I never feel like that, so I wouldn't know. But
right, no, I've never felt that way. But I think maybe if you do have that feeling, if you're like, well, clearly I am the most talented person here, get a different group.
yeah. I mean, I
also like take it down a notch, because you're not. Like, there's always
very that. I think like a good, healthy workshop environment can be a really good exercise in like all of those things, and like not just not taking your work as personally, but like developing a healthy distance between like work, even that work that's very personal and close to you and real, and creating a barrier where it's like, okay, like that's the experience that I'm representing, but the craft and trying to bring that to an audience and all that kind of stuff is it is a little bit different. It's hard, but I think that that space exists, and I think a good workshop environment tries to encourage people toward that space, and I think a good workshop environment protects that, tries to ensure that that space is like protected and safe for people, that it doesn't get too personal or off, like, yeah, I think it is worth reminding people all the time that, yeah, that your work is not your identity, your person, as much as they might be tied together. Like,
As much as you put
you
your
are not the
identity
subject
into
of the
the
critique.
piece is not, yeah, exactly.
And that's a hard thing for a lot of people. That's a simple concept that's really hard to digest for a lot of people, but it's worth doing. And I think it translates. It's that idea has translated well in my life far beyond like a workshop or creative context. And so like that's one of those things that's been useful to me in ways that continue to surprise me. So yeah.
I also want to go back to the hypothetical jerk I brought up a minute ago. Like, just no matter what, you're not the smartest guy in the room, especially in a workshop setting, because what you're doing in the workshop setting is finding out how your audience um, receives your work. So, like, is all of your audience going to be, the same level of anything? Like, not even necessarily intelligence, but like your audience should have a wide range, and that's why getting feedback from across the board is useful.
Yeah, hopefully. And I mean, like, take, here's an experiment for anybody who's like, going to critique groups or workshops or things like this. If you are so lucky that you have different groups that you can go to, take the same work to two different groups. Let's see how disparate the feedback is. Not only like within each group, like different comments that you get, but how different the groups are. Because I do think like I've seen it enough and I've done this experiment enough that like every room's going to be it's hyper subjective, and so like constantly reminding yourself of that, I think is like someone who's like receiving feedback in a workshop, um taking I think it starts with you having a clear idea of what you want to get out of it, right? I think that's the most important thing. If you have an opportunity to communicate that to your workshop group, take advantage of that and do that, not in an explainy way, but like in a way that it communicates to your group, like, this is what I'm struggling with here. So, if you can direct your attention toward that and anything else you see, I think that's really useful, right? But then like the clear idea you have about the concerns about your work, the easier I think it is to sort of parse comments that are speaking directly to that, as opposed to well-meaning comments that are maybe not as helpful. Right. Like that's another thing I think people take personally is like, oh, I'm in this workshop and it's a privilege to be in a space like that where people are reading your work and caring about it. But that doesn't mean you need to take all of their feedback. I think that's generally probably not a really great idea unless they're all saying the same thing, which almost never happens. Right. So then like, but it's like, oh, if I'm ignoring this person's feedback, am I being rude to them? Like, no, you're not being rude to them. They gave you sincere feedback. It just didn't speak to like your needs or concerns for the work. And so you appreciate that feedback. You just don't necessarily like use it or apply it. You know what I mean? And that's fine. That's going to be every workshop. And I think for me, that was the hardest thing, because I was like, oh man, all these smart people are like reading my work and taking me seriously. And feels great, but it's also like pressure. And like, I want the work to improve. I want to do right by people who spend time on my work to help me get better. I want them to feel like I respect their opinion. And it took me a while of doing that to realize like, it's not about respecting their opinion. It's about respecting the work and knowing what the work needs. And that's not an easy thing to do, but the more you can have that for yourself when you go into a workshop setting, I think you can help the group help you. And I think you can better sort of like clarify for yourself what's coming in that's useful and what maybe that you can sort of like thank people for and maybe sort of let go. That's hard, I think.
Yeah, and something we haven't touched on yet is how a like-minded person or someone who writes similarly to you or someone who knows your writing really well is not necessarily the person you want feedback from. Um, I've been using the same person as like my primary editor for, I don't know, going on 10 years. And
Wow.
she knows my work too well. She knows what I'm getting at a lot of the time. And so she gets it and therefore may not point out what's missing. Um, and I mean, it's wonderful because we really, really trust each other. And I feel incredibly lucky about that. But um, she's also, and I really love that she's not at all nice to me. If I do need help, she's very, very direct with me, and I'm grateful for that. This is probably a personal thing, but like, don't, um, don't dance around what you're saying to me. If you're workshopping me, hello
I think
world.
in general, yeah, I don't think that's helpful to anybody, but anyway, go ahead.
Don't sugarcoat it, yeah. And in that, you know, we found each other, this person and myself, because we got each other's work, which is super, super useful in the beginning, and it helps you, you know, trust that person's feedback because they're doing similar things in their work. Um, but that doesn't. My point is that that doesn't work forever. Like, yes, definitely find that person and hold on to them, but there will come a point when their feedback's not so useful because they know your work, the same as, you know, you can't read your own work for revision because you already know what your point is. So it's hard to know if the point is coming across if you already know what the point is. um However,
Yeah, I mean, I think both and I think is like the ideal situation. So like if you are going to a critique group that's maybe like something like we have at Writer Studio, where every couple of weeks there's the same people that come regularly, but you know, people kind of come in and out. You don't always know who's going to be there. Versus maybe you've got a couple people that have been reading your work for a long time and like know your work really well. Like you said, they anticipate things, they know your moves, they're familiar with your style, they're going to pick up on things in a way that someone who's not familiar with your work might need a little more effort or might take them a little longer or something like that. And you want to know that because that's more of the readers that you're going to be encountering on the street. I think like having different questions for those different, you know what I mean? Trying to focus. That's what
some
giving giving writers the opportunity and empowering them to like trust that they're not just going to like give away all their candy about what they're writing about in a critique setting, but also can like help guide the attention of the people who are participating in it matters, because then you can ask different questions. You can, you know, like for something like that, like you know, I was in a critique group that met for a off and on for a few years. That was like very, very helpful. And we all write very differently, but we kind of know each other's stuff. And everybody felt really comfortable like asking those specific questions. And like, you know, we weren't always bringing work with the same questions or for the same kind of feedback. You know, different work came with different concerns and different questions. And like that group was able to address them because we knew each other. And I think that made that a little bit easier. So like, you know, having a space where you can maybe get sort of more general, less guided feedback, and then something where you've got those people who know your work, who are so, yeah, I mean, like the people that you send Christmas cards to and buy dinner and stuff. You know, you take care of those people. But you also like, you know, you can challenge them too. Like if you're reading their work, hopefully it's reciprocity. I think that's the important thing too in a workshop. Like if your work is being read, you've got to put in that work. I think there's nothing ruder than going to like an open critique group and like having your work read and then just bouncing out. It's like, thanks everybody for doing work for me. Have a nice day. Like, don't be that person. That's not cool. But if you've got that reciprocity and you've got a relationship with them, you can start to kind of like challenge them a little bit and kind of like push them to sort of, you know, maybe give you a little bit different feedback or focus. Because I think we do, you know, I know when I'm working with students, like my feedback tends to take the same form. I like questions. I always tell people, I think, especially when they're starting out, like, I don't know what to say about this, or I don't have a vocabulary for, you know, I haven't done a lot of writing workshops, so I don't have that kind of lingo to talk about people's work. And like, that's something that I think in terms of giving feedback that people get self-conscious about. And I always tell people when they're starting, just ask questions, you know, be totally blank. Just ask, even if they sound really basic and dumb. Like, I've been in workshops where like those really basic and fundamental questions were the ones that the writers, including this writer, were not thinking of all the way through, right? Needed to go back and sort of do some like groundwork and rebuild that foundation a little bit. So like, I don't think there are necessarily like dumb questions or anything like that. And I think if you can gear it toward that rather than like, this is what I'm noticing, or this is wrong, or
Totally. And also, like, if questions feel like you like, right, if the writer is muted and not allowed to answer your questions, it's still totally fine to ask them, but also you could just use the language a little differently. I'm interested to know than the
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Um,
that sort of stuff. I think that I find to be helpful for me, and I've had a lot of people tell me that that is helpful when I've, you know, done that for them. So, and that's just super simple. And I think like part of it is it takes away the authority. Like if I'm telling you things about your work, then it sounds like I know some stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, as opposed to like, I don't think I know anything, but I want to know more about this work and how. So, and I like, it's cool to be like that. Like, you know,
which is
that's not willful ignorance. That's just trying to be of open mind, which I think when you're doing this kind of stuff, you really need to be, because the more you bring your sort of preconceptions and your hangups to a workshop, you know, if somebody's writing about a difficult subject about their own life, like you were talking about, and it's something that you have some sort of moral issue with or whatever, like, you know, if you can't check that a little bit, it's going to color everything you're going to say about it, and not in probably the most helpful way. um so doing that kind of work and kind of self-checking like that, I think is really is necessary. And you know, it's cool to say like, I have no idea what's going on in this pump. I've said it about my own pumps quite a bit, and so have other people, and it's cool. And then you start to put it together. What do you know? What does stand out? You know, I've worked. You know, I've been really fortunate to work with really young kids and elderly kids and all the kids. And they a lot of times, yeah, like younger kids or people, you know, students who haven't done this stuff before, they don't, a lot of times they don't not talk because they don't have anything to say. They're struggling to sort of articulate what they want to say.
I want to say too that person, the person who's new to workshopping, often has the best feedback and the best things to say because they're not so indoctrinated into the culture.
Yeah.
And that's so helpful. Also, the method that we did um, in my first year of college was, I'm looking at your Kazim, one of the Kazim
Mm.
pieces you sent me.
Yeah, Kazim Ali. Yeah.
Um, the workshop out loud is what we did, where you pass around the piece and everybody, not everybody, but many people read your work aloud, and then without holding it in their hands, you know, ordinarily in traditional workshopping, everyone reads the piece, everyone has a physical piece in front of them. Um, and when people are retelling it to you, then they're doing it from memory, which honestly, you know, it works less well with poetry, but it allows them to show you, to illustrate the essence that they receive rather than trying to pinpoint specific words. And I think that when we do that, when we're staring at the piece trying to give feedback, we get really caught in the weeds a lot of the time. And that isn't, like you were saying, you know, giving line edits isn't really what we come to workshop for.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, but I think like a lot of times we're looking for those more holistic questions, like, is this working? Is this communicating the idea that I want? Is this hitting the emotional register that I want? You know, that sort of stuff, right?
Right. If I
And I
do,
don't know that line edits get there, but that kind of workshopping that you're talking about, I think does, because yeah, and I think it works with, I've done that with poetry and stuff, and I think it works really well because the essence, exactly what you said, like you can't, because you don't have the text in front of you to sort of manipulate in that way, or kind of like focus, you've got to like concentrate on, what did I get out of this piece, like what's the feeling that I have, or like what's the lasting thing, and like speaking to that, I think a lot of times is what people really come to workshop for. It's not necessarily, am I using the right word here, is this proper standard English, like that kind of stuff, like that can be dealt with later.
Well, that's
um
also, a lot of the time that's, I come to workshop with my third draft. Um, Mostly my rough drafts are a little too rough for me to feel comfortable sharing. Uh, and there will be spots where, you might, if you know me well, then you'll know that the reason I have something highlighted or bolded is not stylistic, but it's because I think that's the wrong word.
right.
Or I'll specifically say at the end, like, I need help with word choice. But like usually that's not the goal. Usually we're looking at big picture stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the word choice and all that, I mean, that's what makes it yours, right? It's all been said before. That's the bad news, but it hasn't been said by you. And so like when you start dicking around too much with like people's word choices and like their phraseology, as it were, like it becomes less them regardless of what they're writing about. And like I look back at a lot of like feedback I gave my cohort in the MFA days, and I just want to apologize to any of them that might be out there right now. I love y'all, and I'm sorry. That was like not my intention. I gave helpfulness in the spirit of much love. Went into all of that work, but like I look back at it, it's like, oh man, I was like, that probably was not very helpful. And now I try to do something totally different. And like that list, that Cosm, I got to see him present a few years ago at AWP. And
I
he's
just
got,
noticed that was the Seattle one.
yeah, I think, I can't remember if it was that one
It's
or,
Seattle on the page.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. We were, so we were there. Okay. And like that just kind of blew my mind. And like that, I've just been more and more interested in getting away from that sort of traditional workshop structure as quickly as possible.
I regret that it took me so long to understand the point of the, I guess, non-traditional workshops, because I just wasn't used to it, and so I didn't think it served me. And now the way that I receive criticism is so different because of that.
And I think it's great. I mean, because of, geniuses like him, and people thinking about these things out loud and writing about these things, like, that's, I think, starting to change. I'm not really in that. I'm not in the MFA world in that way. I don't teach creative writing at a college
So
level or
hanging
anything
out with
like
us
that.
on Facebook, Ryan did post the link to that list of workshops in the chat on this video.
But however we can think about, like, what are we trying to get, as writers, what are we trying to get out of the work? How can we help each other, you know, get the water out of those stones, right? And I don't know that the method, right? I'm sort of adverse to anything like, this is the workshop method, this is the way you write a novel. This is like, it's antithetical to everything I've learned about all artistic practices. Like there's many ways, there are maybe infinite ways, but like, and I don't think, I think there are good things about the traditional workshop method, but I think like the ways we can sort of build on those and like take what works and leave what doesn't. And I think one of the things that doesn't is like, not giving writers a chance to sort of like be present in the conversation of their own work. I don't know that that's healthy. Like I had a student that I was working with, that I was tutoring, and she was in an online school, and she got an assignment to write a personal essay about something that she did extraordinarily well, like the best thing that she did. But because this was some weird high school essay, she was not allowed to, and she couldn't use research. It all had to be from her own personal experience, but she could not use the first person. She could not use first person I. And I was like, so you're being asked to write an essay telling people how to do a thing that you know how to do really well, but you cannot take ownership of or be present in your own experience while telling us about this. And she's like, yeah, I think that sounds right. And I was like, that's madness. I don't know what the use of that is. That is not useful, other than just, that's taking yourself out of the equation in a way that like is not productive.
This is a
Right.
totally irrelevant anecdote, but it's a really good one. When I was learning this, I was in like elementary school when I was learning about, it was journalism. It was a journalism program. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand how I was going to write about something that I was experiencing without doing it in first person. And I ended up writing the whole thing about Sarah Elgatian. And I think that that's
You Ricky Hendersoned it.
but
You
that's
got into Ricky Hendersonville, where we talk about ourselves in the third person, and it's weird. It's
but
a
like
weird thing.
it's weird to talk about an experience you're experiencing without
Yeah.
talking about yourself.
Yeah.
I think it would be even, I mean, it's silly. You know, and I was 10 or whatever. But like that's the danger that you get into when you're trying to speak about the personal in the third person. Like you either make it personal or you speak really vaguely. Like there are people who, which is garbage.
Right. Yeah, but like if the point is to relate what you know how to do and something of you and your experience, and then not to be in your experience, I think like I don't know that that's even healthy. I get the sort of like language exercise of doing that, but like that wasn't necessarily the primary focus of the essay. Yeah, and like that's a technical thing, right? And it gets away from the spirit of the thing. And I think most of us come to writing for the spirit of the thing, and so think once I kind of thought about the extent to which the traditional workshop method is basically kind of asking us to just put your work out here, and then don't take it personally, but also like to some extent don't participate in the conversation about this thing that you made, even in like a critical semi-objective way. Like it's like that kind of rings in the same way. It's like, wow, man, I don't know that that's healthy either. And then also like to get to the spirit of the thing, like yeah, like what you're talking about with the text. And like there are a couple things that when I saw Cosm give that talk, it was like, oh yeah, like I love engaging with the text. I love fucking around with text just as much as anybody else, but like it sometimes can get in the way from trying to like speak to the spirit of the thing, or how something moves you, or how something hits you in the room. And like I'm super interested in that kind of stuff. And so like thinking about different ways that you can share work and get feedback that recenter that focus on that experience, because that's the stuff that I'm really interested in audience having, as opposed to them, I don't think of audiences ever, insofar as I ever have an audience for anything that I write, of them like sitting over and like
I would say that's
scanning my
not the
poems and
mentality to
stuff
have.
like
If
that.
you have
Like,
your audience
whoa.
in mind, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, at least for the way I'm doing it, I don't want to advocate for anybody else because I don't know how well it's
I mean,
working for me. So
I
this
would
is not
say
an endorsement, but
I would say in 75% of my videos, I'm reminding people there's no audience if there's no writing. So just write.
very that.
Most of us are not writing textbooks, you know.
Yeah.
Most of us are not writing something with a guaranteed audience, and most of us, if we have that guaranteed audience, can't pinpoint an age
Sure.
or
And
a
but
background.
yeah. And I think even if you're doing something kind of formulaic, and this is like less in my wheelhouse, I've been less in these kind of workshops, but if you're writing sort of like, very kind of specific genre fiction, right? That's got very specific expectations and has like all these kind of formal things that those have to be there. I would imagine if it was me, and I've heard other writers say this, like, yeah, you want to get feedback on all that technical stuff. You want to know that like plot is making sense. Yeah, all that stuff, the continuity stuff is all together. But at the same time, don't you also want some feedback on like the word choice and the
Oh,
expression of the
absolutely,
thing,
absolutely.
because that is
You
the
want to
thing
make
that
sure that
makes your work yours, and somehow hopefully in some way distinct from all the other work that's out there like that. And so I don't know, just focusing on all that, on the kind of like formulaic box checking stuff is good for anybody.
and that is you bring up something that I wanted to get to sooner or later. If you are writing in genre or you're writing a specific form, right? If you're a poet, if you're a fantasy writer, if you're a sci-fi writer, if you're a essayist, it is useful to talk to people who understand that genre. I mean, I definitely would say, you know, if you're a poet, you still should talk to some prose writers, and if you're a prose writer, you should still talk to some poets, etc. Um, but
100%.
but if you are writing something that is a niche or is specific in some way, you definitely want people who engage with that type of work to be among your primary um, workshop friends, because they're the ones who are going to understand, the world you're working within.
Yeah, I mean,
And it can be really hard to find a group of like more than two um, high fantasy writers that you don't already know or whatever.
yeah, I mean, like around here, the groups that I know about, obviously, we've got Writer Studio.
And we take all kinds.
Yeah, we are non-denominational. That's the first and third Saturdays of each month. There's Quint City Poets, which meets on the first Wednesday evening of each month. Um, there's a Quad City Writers Group, meetup group, I believe, that meets either at or through the Davenport Library. I'm not 100% sure how they're operating right now. I think there's a youth writing group that meets at the Moline Library. I think Davenport might have one too. I'm not 100% sure about that. So there's a few around. I think
I want to give a shout out to the writers' rooms too, because they have specific groups for genre. They've got a romance room, they call them rooms, but they're the critique groups. They've got sci-fi, they've got urban fantasy. I think they have high fantasy. Check them out. They're the woman who runs their stuff is on top of her game.
cool.
And they have so many different groups for specific genre. So definitely check out the writers' rooms.
Sure, yeah, and I was gonna say, like, I mean, I know there are various societies of children's writers, romance writers, things like that, and like, so if you are working in those genres, I think it's worth maybe checking out those organizations a little bit, because they can probably point you to places to get that sort of genre specific, area specific feedback that is, yeah, I think super critical. But also not the only thing. I get bummed out anytime people are too focused on is writing a formula. I don't know, people seem to have formulas for it, but those formulas don't work for everybody, and I thought that's how
It
math
has to
was
be,
supposed.
if
I
it's a
thought
formula,
math worked was like the
hyper-formula.
formula works for everybody all the time, not like, oh, this is the formula for me, but I will present it as the formula for we, even
I
though it's not.
I love hate that so much too, when you go to like a reading and somebody's like, "Tell me about your process," to the author, and they're like, "I don't know, man. I just write. Good luck."
Yeah, I mean, some people are really cagey about it. Some people are really open about it. Some people just aren't
But
necessarily
it's
able to
so
articulate it.
so different for
But if you
everyone,
could get,
and
yeah,
everyone's looking for a formula, and you just have to figure out what works for you.
right.
Unfortunately, like that's not easy at all, but it is the truth.
It's like everybody who ever comes in, like, or cold calls the writing center, like whatever, I end up telling them about, like, getting their book published or getting working on editing or whatever it is. It's like, I can't tell you any of this will be not, easy or not time consuming. So yikes. I don't know. If that's a problem, maybe somebody else out there has those answers, but I've been looking and I don't know who those people are. But I mean, I think it's worthwhile. I get bummed out. I know people who are like far enough along with their writing careers, whatever that means to them, whatever shape that takes for them, and they sort of hit a point where it's like, I don't really need workshops, or like it seems like they hit a point, and they probably have readers, they probably have, but like, I don't know, for my dollar, I think one of the best things that I've done for my writing and what's helped me in workshops, both as someone who's getting feedback, but more often as someone who's like leading a workshop, particularly with younger people and things like that, the more workshops I can go to, the more critique groups that I can be in, the more I can see different people do this stuff and think through
Right.
this stuff, regardless of genre.
And I'm not.
All of it has been informative. I don't know that I've ever taken any kind of writing workshop or been in a critique group where it was like, I got literally nothing out of that. Like, that's never happened. And I've been doing this for more than half my life now. So.
I'm not, some sort of Isabel Allende or Jonathan Safran Foer, where I'm like amazingly talented and make money off my writing. However, I also don't think that I'm ever going to get to, like, say I do get to that point. I cannot imagine that more, I mean, this, with a grain of salt, but I cannot imagine more feedback is worse. Within reason.
Well,
Um,
and like those people all have editors, right? Those people
they
all have
do.
dedicated professional editors that are, that are doing that work in that way with that, sort of eye. So like, I think honestly, I think a lot of times it's just the idea. It's like, well, I know how to do this thing, so I don't need to learn any more about it, which I think is like
Never true. It's
a
never.
bummer and dangerous and not good.
If you
I
ever
learned
think
I
that
learned that very
somebody-
young as a musician. And my band teacher told me, if you ever think you've learned everything about whatever your craft is, playing an instrument,
if you're
writing,
the smartest guy in the room, go to another room.
leave, hang up the instrument. It's over. But
Yeah,
you never do,
there will
so that will
never be
never
a point
happen.
where you can't improve. Even,
Or just grow or learn. Improvement, I think
it's relative.
I get sticky about stuff like that because then it's like my work has to be better than it was. It's like, well, what does better mean?
There's
We
no rubric. It's art.
if you feel like it's like representing what you feel and think in a way that is new and fresh and is keeping you engaged and is responding and other people are responding to it, I think like, whether it's better or newer or more thoughtful or that all feels arbitrary to me, and you can't control getting that out of a workshop necessarily, whether you're receiving or whether you're giving. You can't. So like just thinking about it in terms of like, what do I want to get out of my work? How can I push this or do something different? If you can start from that place, I think that's probably the healthiest way to go in.
That I think for me, if I were to give one piece of advice on, how to get the feedback you want or how to trust the feedback you're getting. I think that's the number one piece of advice I could give is, if you come prepared for this workshop and, sometimes you're like, I'm going to go to workshop. I need to do this for me and you're not prepared. Cool. Like still go to workshop. But if you come prepared, if you know what you're lacking, or if you know what questions you have ready before workshop, you're going to be able to better trust the responses you're getting to your work because you're asking specific questions. Even if you don't get answers to your specific questions, you know what you're looking for, and you can then, discern better for yourself the feedback you receive.
Yeah, for sure. And like participating the whole time. Like we keep talking about this in this A-B way, but I do most of what I've learned about trying to be a helpful participant in a writing workshop, I've learned from watching other people, like being in a workshop, but listening to other people talk about someone else's work. You know what I mean? Like being present, not just there to get my juice,
totally.
Right? Or give other people the juice I have for them, but to like be participating in the whole thing, because like the more you can hear other people talk about this and think through this, if you're listening and you care about it, I do think like it quickly too. I mean, we see this every year with YW. These, we have about half the group who's done this before. We have about half the group that's never really done this before. And really after like a week of doing it, it goes from like feeling like a fish that's in some new water to it just being the water. And we don't talk about this stuff anymore. It just sort of goes, and like, these are 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. So I think if you can be attentive in that way to the whole workshop experience, you'll really get a lot more out of it, and you'll help yourself and help other people more than you would otherwise.
In Writer's Studio just a couple days ago, this last Saturday, I didn't bring anything to critique, but definitely somebody asked someone else a question of their work, and I was like, oh damn, that question applies to me. So like I'll always
for sure that
say, and you've heard me say it a million times, but like every time I engage with something writery, not writerly, but writery, every time I go to a class, even if it's not on my thing, I end up very, very productive as a result of just engaging, even if it's not my genre or not my whatever it is. And that's, I think part of it is definitely just like reinvigorating, getting excited about working, being around other people who are excited about working. But you get a lot of really good advice nonetheless, even if it's not specific to you. And it just, no matter what, is helpful.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I mean. And there's no, the only way to catch all that is to be attentive, right? To like fully participate and not just kind of be there. And I would say most of the workshops I've been in, pretty, you know, like people are there for reciprocity, right? They're there to get something out of the whole experience, not just to get feedback on their work. But I think, yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I do think it's learned by doing, and I do hope that the more people do, the more that these sort of like alternative workshop structures continue to proliferate, and people keep thinking about how they can do this differently. Because I know just from the writers that I know and love and admire that a lot of them think about this stuff all the time, and I'm always grateful to be for that thinking to be made available to me, to the public. Um, like you know, hopefully we're getting away from that, and I think it's important as any artist to be able to like talk about your work a little bit in a way and ask those questions in a way that's not giving it away. You know, like you need to be able to do that. I think if you want to articulate yourself as a writer or as an artist, but also to help you better articulate what you want to articulate in the work itself. And so workshop, I don't know. I've found workshop to be useful in all kinds of ways outside of just people giving me feedback in it. And that's sort of why I love it. You know what I mean? Like the direct feedback thing is cool, but if I pie chart it out,
Also,
be like 40% probably.
At the risk of, I am the cheesiest person in any given room, but at the risk of being super, super cheesy, you also make friends, and it's really nice to have writer friends.
100. Some of the people I love most on this planet are people I met in writing workshops.
And like,
and a lot of them don't write anymore, very sadly. And you know who you are, people. I miss your poems and being in workshops with you.
My favorite folks from my Fiction 1 class. One of them is in the circus now, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. My MFA cohort's about, I think at best 50-50.
That's the coolest thing though, that I can be like, I know someone in the circus. She's an acrobat and the coolest. But you know, it's also cool, like even if they don't stay with the writing, like they still have artist brain and they're still gonna be, I don't, just having artist friends is
well, yeah, and like yes, artists, being surrounded by smart creative people is I think a good healthy lifestyle choice if you can make it. Yeah. But also like just like on a totally practical note, so a few years ago I was fortunate to get invited to, I can't remember what it was called, but it was at Western Illinois University, Quad City campus, and they invited a bunch of people who had English degrees from different walks of life and professions and stuff like that, because you know, despite all the jokes about English degrees, it is like the most diversely employed major in like private public college. So I can't remember. Anyway,
where like understanding of language and communication is useful in the world.
Oh, I know. Who would have thunk it, right? Anyway, or like critical thinking or information.
Things like don't regret, I mean, studying English.
Who would have known? Anyway, but like, so the question was like, what is, you know, I think there were 9 of us on this panel, and everybody was pretty disparate in terms of their employment. Like a lot of them were like more kind of business corporate, and the question was like, what is the thing that you use most that you got from your English degree? And you can imagine almost all of them, despite all these different employment, just what you talked about: strong communications, strong command of the language, critical thinking, all this kind of empathy.
Okay. Critical thinking is not to be understated here either, because
it is not
the ability to close read in general.
Yeah, no, I mean, the critical thinking that I've done in writing workshops has definitely helped me to sharpen my critical thinking skills writ large. But what my response was, so I went late, I was like next to last. So I'm listening to all these people, communication skills, command of the language, communication skills, command of the language. My response was, you know, not necessarily an English degree, but from being in creative writing workshops, the English degree plus that, right? Being able to take criticism, being able to give criticism, being able to be in a room full of people that are thinking about a problem or an idea or whatever, and being able to think about it in a lot of different ways, being able to participate in that conversation, being able to self-check when I'm being corrected or when somebody brings an idea that is like seemingly at odds or different, like that, oh, I get conflicting feedback. It's like, that's just people reading it different ways. Like, why? The question isn't like, how do I resolve this conflict? The question is like, why is this feedback conflicting? Like, what did I put in the work that's resulting in this conflicting feedback? And that's the interesting question. But that, and the whole room was like, oh shit. And I was like, it's real. I'm like, I know a lot of people who can't do that. I know, like, it's something that I know, a lot of people I know from theater too, like the same kind of thing, having to go in from
being able to take criticism, interpret criticism, and respond to criticism is a
big
skill. And
it's not sexy in this context, but like, it's one of those things it pays. It's helped me in all kinds of ways that I would have never anticipated when I was going through it, because I just wanted to go to poetry school.
I want to give a shout out. I just got a message from someone who's watching along with us, who is a dancer, who says that this is all the same with dancing, creating a choreography and dancing it. I mean, there's, again, I know I'm cheesy, but like everything is art. Like it is.
No, I mean, that would be something else too. I think like the more, I think the first commandment, how to be a better writer, read diversely, and not just like diverse authors, but everything, news reports, scientific reports, journal, like everything, right?
In the depression video, I talked about like engage with art. It doesn't have to be the art that you hold closest to your heart, but like, look up on the internet your favorite painter, or like painters, just the term painters I've never heard of, and you're engaging with art and it's stirring something.
Yeah, but in terms of like critique and craft development, my favorite thing to read is like what like when you're talking about like writers, like what's your process? Like any opportunity I get to hear any artist, pretty much whether I admire them or not, Super Cat, I'm always here for people talking about their craft, their process, anything like that. Like whether it's theater, whether it's visual art, like the overlap, the associations and the interconnectivity that you'll find between those different creative processes, I think are always illuminating, and will point you in directions where you can sort of, if you want to, and you're attentive enough to try, you can adapt processes that are maybe not for your medium, or your chosen medium. Like sense memory and acting is the one that sort of like most comes readily to mind. Like when writers talk about like, oh, I got to get in this character and I got to be in this mindset, whatever, like pretty much most writers I've heard talk about that sound exactly like actors that I've heard talk about using sense memory and trying to get into it's like, and so when I put that together, it was like, oh man, that's super interesting. And like being a musician first, I mean, the number of times I've read musicians talking about their craft, and it's informed how I think about my writing, or writing craft that makes me think about musicianship a little bit differently. It's just, that's a fun web to make more complex and weave as time goes on. So I would encourage people to do that too. I really wish I had a cat crawling over my computer. I'm very jealous right now.
I'm really excited and amused that he's being so chill, and I think it's because he knows your voice. Normally when I talk at the computer, he's a terrorist and I have to watch but today he's just been laying next to me this whole time.
He's a good boy.
Sleeping mostly, and I think it's because he knows you. But yeah, this is a huge privilege that I have. Is my sister is the cat. Yes, he is a privilege, and I love him. My sister's a painter, so I've always been engaged with visual artists just by virtue of knowing her, and she surrounds herself with other artists, and so it's a privilege to understand the intersectionality of different mediums.
Yeah, I think like one name just to throw out for people, that Krista Franklin would be someone. I haven't read as much of her talking about her craft.
You're right, I'm gonna grab it because I think it's
incredible poet and visual artist. And just thinking about,
I can't get up. Same
with On Duplan. Yeah. Definitely some folks in the Quad Cities know about On. On's been here a couple times and is, another one of those like genius level thinkers and artists and writers.
High five about Krista Franklin. My eyesight is really going, and I don't really wear my glasses anymore since I'm home all the time. But she wrote Too Much Midnight, and it's one of the most stunning in all regards books that I think I own visually and literarily.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Shout out to Becca
It's
Claver for
incredible.
recommending that one to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Any recommendations you can get from Becca Claver are recommendations you should take.
Yes, no, she has never steered me wrong.
Probably can't imagine. Anyway.
Yeah, we're over an hour now and I'm thrilled about it, but probably our audience is waning. Do you have closing remarks about how to get the most out of workshop?
I mean, just to have some idea of what you want to get out of it going in, and also go in with an idea of participating fully and reciprocating the feedback and time and energy that people give to your work, because it's one of the biggest blessings you'll ever get as an artist. And it's your responsibility, I think, to try to like pay that back at least in equal, if not try to, pay it back even more.
If you have to be selfish about it, you're going to receive from giving.
I think it'll I think the more selfish you are about it, the less I think you stand to get out of the whole process. So the more you can sort of center reciprocity and center question asking and center that, you don't maybe know as much as you think you do, even if you don't think you know much at all. The maxim, I know nothing, is not a bad one, I think, to bring to the table sometime, and just respond honestly and genuinely in the spirit of helpfulness. There's a lot to be gained.
I would argue with you about that, but I think that that's a really good mentality in this regard, because if you know nothing, I think that you're more open to asking questions and receiving. And
maybe not I know nothing, but I withhold judgment, sort of, you know what I mean? You're not there to like weigh in and give the final evaluation of somebody's work. You're there to help somebody bring their work to its like fullest realized potential. And if you can help them do that at all, you've done a very like noble and worthy thing. But doing that, I think, requires a lot of self-check.
Openness to that mentality that allows you to think critically in a new way. I don't know, this like nascent mentality, that's one of my favorite words, is super helpful for being a critiquer, not just
for sure. I mean, your judgment's never going to be the final judgment. You're there to help. You're there to work in service of someone else's work, and that's an immense privilege. So take it serious and have fun with it. Just because it's something to be serious about, don't forget about the joy aspect of it, because like if we're not here for some joy, what the hell are we all doing here?
I love that. That's the perfect closing moment, except that we've got more to say. What's up at the Midwest Writing Center? As of late, we've got 11 days left of our 2020 anthology, so get your submissions in for that. Questions, comments, concerns, you can hit us up on social media, but more effective platform for that would be submissions@mwcqc.org. That's an email address. Make your subject line either question about anthology, or submit your anthology there. All the info for what we're looking for is on the website. It's on social media. We're also, Iron Pen is back. Super pumped about that. I have participated in the Iron Pen contest many times myself, and I think that it's just a really excellent way to forgive me for being cheeky. Flex your writing muscles. That's a 24-hour writing contest. We give you the prompt at 5 p.m. on Friday, and you need to have your work submitted by 5 p.m. on Saturday. That's poetry, fiction, nonfiction. We will email you the prompt. It'll also be on our voicemail and on our website. So if you, for whatever reason, are not sure if you want to participate, you can visit the website, check out what the prompt is, and then register. But you should register now anyway, because it's an excellent thing to do. And it's $10 to register, and everyone who participates is entered a chance to win full tuition to the David R. Collins Writers Conference, which is the greatest event of my year. Not joking. But I'm not having children or getting married this year, so moving on. What else do we have going on? We've got the Bespoke, that's poetry on demand. We are offering this service to you, personalized poetry that starts at 20 bucks. There's a whole lot of information on the website about that and a little bit of information on our social media about it. But basically, you're looking for a special gift, or, you want someone to praise you in verse. You fill out a quick Google form, you tell us what you're looking for from a poem, and one of the most talented local poets will write something really, really beautiful for you. We've already got a couple, and I can tell you they're fantastic.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
what else? What am I?
We just announced a new event. We're doing a journaling for mental health workshop. The Writing Center is partnering with NAMI in Davenport. I'll be one of the three hosts of that workshop. I'm going to talk about some just basic, how to get started with a basic journaling practice that can benefit not only getting a little bit organized and sort of clearing your head, but that can help manage mental health a little bit. There'll also be Jody Toohey, author, publisher, president of the Midwest Writing Center board, will also be presenting, as well as Christina Wassenhove, who is a licensed mental health counselor who's been volunteering with NAMI for a few years. So it'll be great. It's free. There's a suggested $10 donation. All donations will be split 50-50 with the Midwest Writing Center and NAMI.
NAMI is the acronym for the organization, which is the National Association for Mental Illness, I believe.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct. So we're super stoked about that one. I've done a journaling workshop in a bunch of different contexts for years. So I'm really excited to partner and have someone who actually really knows what they're talking about on the mental health end of things, as opposed to someone who's just cares a lot about it and is very interested, but is not in any way, shape, or form a mental health professional. So that will be great. And like I said, it's donations suggested, but it's free and open to anybody. So reach out to us for more information.
I will give some props to that. I will be taking that workshop. I didn't expect to in advance, but as someone who's journaled just during life, I recently this year, 2021, decided I was going to try and do it as a method of self work and health, self care and self work, like becoming a better person, but also taking care of myself. Journaling has sort of taken on a new angle for me, so I'm excited about that personally. Let's just get a little vulnerable here.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's good. And it's not like this isn't like a writing for publication kind of thing. Even though we spent the last hour and 15 minutes talking about writing critiques and sharing work with strangers and things like that, it's not going to be anything like that.
I mean,
It's
definitely
totally
though,
different.
and this again, this is advice I give a lot, but when I'm having trouble writing, I journal because usually there's something
there's an ever I mean there's a lot to be had for it personally, and there's an ever growing body of evidence to suggest a lot of mental, emotional, and physical health benefits from such a practice that can be really simple and really basic, and that no one ever needs to see. It's just for you. So, and I think sometimes that's the best kind of writing.
So I'm not gonna, because we have taken a lot of people's time. I'm not gonna set that 5-minute timer, but I do encourage you to do some journaling today. Set your own timer for however long, and either work up a draft or journal. I'm gonna journal personally. It's in my mind now, and it needs to get done. Thank you so much, Ryan, for hanging out with me today. And as always, I hope everyone is going to go ahead and write more light into their lives.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.